Story. Adamas EP1 starts with a man walking down a dark and deserted road in pouring rain mentioned that his mother's last words were an anonymous letter where he claimed innocence. That man was a death row inmate who murdered his father. Elsewhere, in prison, a security guard hears something suspicious in one of the cells and finds an entire room full of inmates dead. Well, except for the one who did the killing. To no one's surprise, the police officer ends up dead as well. As the sirens blare and security starts swarming through the compound in search of the missing murderer, we see a very cool, rain-drenched title card. Later, said murderer cum death row inmate is moved somewhere else as a huge crowd gathers outside to ask for the death penalty for him. It's a matter of debate, one that can play a vital role in the upcoming elections. 1 month later, twin brothers Soo Hyun and Woo Sin get ready for the day, and it's apparent that both of them are polar opposites of each other. While one is messy and relaxed, the other is methodical and sort of uptight. Their social status, too, seems to be quite different from each other. While Woo Sin is a writer, Soo Hyun is a hotshot lawyer. Woo Sin is being hired to write a memoir on Kwan JQ of Haisong Group as a ghostwriter, and according to Ms. Yo, the offer is pretty great. The restrictions are a lot, but the offer is pretty lucrative, so Woo Sin takes it on, much to Ms. Yeo's surprise. Meanwhile, we are introduced to Kim Seo-hee, a reporter who is feeling rather intimidated and nervous as she makes her way to work. She is shocked to find Woo Sin there as well but isn't able to catch a hold of him. Meanwhile, Soo Hyun is getting forced to pick on the case that rocking the nation so that the department can back the presidential candidate. Soo Hyun doesn't seem to be interested to play these mind games with them, however, and refuses to take it on. He also mentions that it'd be interesting for the press if the son of a murder victim becomes a prosecutor in such a case. Anyway, he reiterates that he won't agree to something like this even if candidate Wong asks him to do so and leaves them to stew over the rejection. Later on, as Soo Hyun's supervisor destroys stuff in anger, he meets with Woo Sin, and the latter tells his brother to stop the antics lest he loses his job. Soo Hyun, however, isn't bothered. Even if he's demoted or ostracized, he will not resign. As the two brothers talk, Seo-hee tries to catch up but isn't able to catch the brothers and is forced to retreat for the time being. At lunch, Woo Sin tells his brother that he is going away on a month-long trip and that he wouldn't be able to contact him. Soo Hyun mentions that it might be for the best since they need to heal from everything that has happened to them. In spite of the rather touching comment, Woo Sin reiterates that he is not going to take him on as an older brother, and much to Soo Hyun's chagrin, Woo Sin leaves the conversation at that. At the Haisong estate, Woo Sin checks out the various privacy measures, which are, to be honest, a bit scary. There's a lot of it. After successfully going through all the checkpoints and learning that he can't even keep his clothes inside, he enters a biometric chamber to register himself, so to speak. Of course, this isn't a cult. Of course, it isn't. Anyway, Chief of Security Choi Tae-sung doesn't seem too excited about his arrival and mentions that Woo Sin looks like someone, and from the look on his face, he might not be too chummy with them. Meanwhile, Woo Sin is taken to his home for the time being, and the house that he stays in looks just like the home from mine. Anyway, he meets Ms. Kwan, who is not a nice person to be around, and tells Woo Sin to not expect her to treat him well just because he is the boss's guest. Once inside the weird house, Mrs. O gives Woo Sin a rundown of the place and how the day-to-day activities operate. The number of maids makes this place a huge red flag. Unfortunately for Woo Sin, his solo vacation in an attractive but creepy mansion turns problematic when he finds Lee Dong-rim to be his roommate and assistant. Woo Sin isn't happy with how the situation turned up, but I'm guessing it'll be nice to have a known face here. That night, Woo Sin realizes that Ms. Kwan is spying on them from outside the door. Meanwhile, Soo Hyun reminisces his father's death after the perpetrator is seen on the news, in all probability facing death if capital punishment becomes legalized. On the other hand, Woo Sin investigates strange sounds from the house after he wakes up at night. As she follows the sound, to find one of the maids unconscious. He asks for help from the others, who all seem too scared to do anything. When Ms. Kwan gets there, it seems like she's annoyed with her falling ill than anything else. After the girl is taken to the hospital or somewhere, Woo Sin comes back to the room to lament Dong Rim throwing a wrench in his plans. The next day, at a swanky office space, Woo Sin again implores Dong Rim to go back home, to which he mentions that he knows why he took up this ghostwriting assignment since he's not someone who'd agree to do this. Dong Rim's guess is totally wrong, but Woo Sin looks like he has seen a ghost. It seems like our protagonist isn't as innocent as he seems to be. Later, as Woo Sin meets Ms. Kwan, she reminds him to mind his own business and to keep things that he sees and hears on the premises a secret. When he goes off to explore the grounds, he meets Haisong, the daughter-in-law, at the garden and asks to be interviewed for the memoir then and there, much to Woo Sin's shock. Haisong mentions that he should get out of the premises as soon as possible since the more he knows about the people and the place, the worse it will be for him. However, Woo Sin disagrees with her, and that is when the chairman comes back. Ms. Kwan is ecstatic to see him. The happiness on her face is almost creepy. The moment he arrives, he calls for Woo Sin, and then when Ms. Kwan complains to him that their guest doesn't listen to her, he mentions that it will be a fun project for her. Woo Sin, meanwhile, goes to meet the chairman, who mentions that he reminds him of someone. After some interesting chit-chat in which they both try to intimidate each other, it seems like Chairman Kwan has agreed to Woo Sin's demands. However, the tension in the air is thick, and you can feel it through the tense body language of the two of them. On the other hand, Soo Hyeon finally meets Seo Hee, who asks for his consultation. It's about Lee Chong-woo. She mentions that he is being framed as the murderer, and if he does, in fact, die, then Soo Hyeon would never be able to catch his father's real killer. This strikes a nerve with him, and he asks her to leave. She leaves a file for him to look into, and although he's furious at her, the file seems to have piqued his interests. Meanwhile, Haisong receives some distressing news, and Wang Byung-chul gets stabbed in the thigh, which turns out to be a PR stunt orchestrated by leader Lee, who asks the politician to lay off trying to control his master and asks him to control himself from next time. Adamas Episode 1 ending. Soo Hyeon can't stop thinking about Seo Hee's claims regarding Lee Chong-woo and finally decides to look through the file when the curiosity gets too much and wonders where the murder weapon can be. Meanwhile, Woo Sin meets Haisong and accepts to sending the intimidating email. Woo Sin mentions that he knows everything about him, even the fact that he's a police officer who is there to keep an eye on the chairman. Haisong is taken aback and asks him what he wants, to which he says that he wants to be the only exception to the vulture eye he has on everyone. When probed about his ulterior motive, he mentions that he is here for Haisong's arrowhead logo, Adamas. He's going to steal it. The episode 1 ends here. Adamas Episode 1 Review. Well, color me intrigued. Adamas Episode 1 is absolutely gripping. Although it's still an introductory episode, I am already fascinated with the storyline and where it can go. Okay, first impressions. Ji-sung is excellent as Woo Sin and Soo Hyeon. Although most of the time, their mannerisms are similar, there are just very subtle quirks and obviously, costumes to set them apart. Although Soo Hyeon seems like the hotshot and gruff lawyer, I think Woo Sin is the real MVP here. The man has no fear. I am really intrigued to know what the deal is with the Kwan household and why Lee Kyung-young ends up being the ruthless head of an empire who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. We just saw him go down in Dr. Lawyer, why her? And again my life. We are back here again with him playing another similar role and being a bad guy. I am waiting to be pleasantly surprised, however, although I don't have much hope. Regardless, the creators have made a very creepy household that reeks fear and murder at every step. The entire Kwan family seems dangerous and will slit your throat at the slightest provocation. It's honestly interesting watching Woo Sin in such a situation because it seems like he's not someone who would take the threat lying down. Meanwhile, Soo Chul's storyline is yet to come to fruition. We follow Woo Sin a lot in the first episode, so I am waiting to see his brother's badass side as well. Other characters, including Haisong and Seo-hee, are also yet to be fleshed out but seem like gutsy women. Hopefully, they don't turn out to be just placeholders. I loved Adamas's background score and cinematography. Everything looks and feels great. Hopefully, the storyline won't disappoint further on. But, just a personal gripe, at 77 minutes, the episode is too long, and you could feel that in a lot of places in the runtime. Check out Adamas on TVN and Disney+. For details, episode-wise synopsis, detailed reviews and explanations of your favorite American or other country series and movies, please tell us in comment section. Thanks for watching.